digging into the topic today and facilitating, we have Annabelle Dunstan. Annabelle's the co-chair of the PRCA Employee Engagement Sector Group and is the author of a book on this subject called The People Business, which I'd recommend to anyone who wants to do further reading on how to drive engagement through internal comms. Annabelle is joined by my colleague, Anne Angelis. She's based over the water in the US, therefore has a very early start today. Thanks for joining us, Anne. Anne is our Executive Vice President for Employee Engagement Strategy. Anne's side, and we have Jenny Edwards. Jenny is the Director in the Corporate and Internal Comms team based in London. And last but not least, we're also very pleased to be joined by our client, Sarah Kemp. Sarah's Group Communications Lead for Page Group. They're a worldwide leader in specialist recruitment, and obviously Sarah has deep expertise in what is going on in the workplace right now. Couple of points before we get going. We'd really like your comments and discussion as we go along. Please do contribute, whether that's in the chat, putting up your hand, speaking out. We're really interested in talking to you and finding out what it is, what the problems are, what the issues, what the challenges, what your insights are, and having a discussion around that. It's also really useful if you could keep your camera on so we can see faces. Totally understand if you've got to dip out for bits and pieces, but we're really nice to see as many of you as we can. So I'm now going to hand over to the team. They can all introduce themselves one by one. So I'm going to start off with Annabelle.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. And yes, just reiterating that point, it's so nice to see faces, because then we know if we're really landing comments and questions that interest you. Thank you. So yes, in addition, I also am the CEO and founder of Question and Retain, and we measure and manage the employee experience. So this is an absolute passion point for me, understanding what's going on in the workplace right now. I've got a particular interest in mental health and mental fitness, I should say, equity, diversity and inclusion, obviously very of the moment and rightly so, particularly in agency world, we've got to be doing more there. B Corp, CSR, ESG with purpose, all these lovely buzzwords, that's our bread and butter, and hopefully some of that will come out through the research we're going to be talking about. Over to Anne to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Annabelle. Andy Angelis here. Really passionate about employee engagement and helping organizations to create environments where their employees can be happy. I'm all about being happy. I think that's how you can be productive, and you spend so much time at work. We all know that, and so much of our identity is wrapped up with our roles. So really also have a passion around this. Before I came to the agency world to help other organizations in this area, I have more than 20 years of corporate comms experience at the Boeing company. So global company, employees in all different kinds of areas. Really important to me to be able to get input from people and kind of help leaders to be able to create those organizations where people can be productive and happy.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Sarah Kemp, and I'm the Group Comms Lead at Page Group. So the reason I'm really intrigued in this conversation, so I head up both external and internal communications at Page Group, and really employees are the heartbeat of a business. Without them, business cannot thrive, and creating an inclusive and winning mindset culture is so important for a business, for both kind of for the business and the individual. It's interesting that you just said there about everyone goes to work, everyone spends most of their life at work. So it's really important for you as an employee to feel like you belong somewhere and you want to be somewhere. And I think more and more we're seeing the businesses that do well are the businesses that retain the best staff. So it's quite, I'm really looking forward to getting involved in this convo today.
Thanks, Sarah. And Jenny.
Well, hi everyone, thanks for coming. PRCA team, thank you very much for having us. I'm Jenny, I'm a director within the corporate practice at 3 Monkeys Zeno in London. I guess the thing
where?
3 Monkeys Zeno in London.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The thing that I'm particularly interested in is the kind of interstice between external comms campaigns, internal comms and employer brand. I think employee engagement has always been key to achieving almost any business objective that a program of external comms is trying to support. Employees need to be your biggest ambassadors. This was true even before the pandemic. But I think now there's an even greater need to think employee first when it comes to designing external comms programs companies need to be grabbing any opportunity to engage their workforce around their purpose, as we'll see when we chat through the research.
Thanks very much. And just a reminder to everyone, if anything sparks your or piques your interest, or we've got a question, please start putting it into the chat and we'll draw that into and make sure our panelists answer your questions and review your points that you come up with. So Anne, I'm going to ask you to just kick off and just give us a bit of background on the aims of the research and what sparked your process in this.
Yeah, great. So Zeno Group has done employee research over the years, and really trying to understand, again, what is it that you can do as a company to help your employees really feel that connection, like everyone talked about earlier. So this latest bit of research was done earlier this year. We saw, as you know, a lot of us did, this confluence of events with the pandemic having been, all of us being locked in and dealing with the pandemic for over a year, the social justice movement and employee activism that we've seen, the economic and labor stress that's been going on, as well as political and government changes, whether it be Brexit or whether it be the change of administration in the United States. So all of those things kind of coming together, we really wanted to get a better understanding of how those factors are impacting employees and what they're expecting from their employers. So we went out and did a survey end of March, early April. We did a global survey in the UK, France, China, and the United States. We surveyed both people who were working full-time and part-time. And we had about 4,000 folks that we surveyed. So we got a good number of people that we could then slice and dice the data and really dive in and understand kind of how people are thinking. And in broad strokes, what we saw is that, and we'll get into some of the details here, but in broad strokes, we saw that generally people are optimistic. They see a new world of work. They're eager to take hold of what they've found valuable that's come out of all of this. But they also are serious about their future and their well-being. And you'll hear a lot about the well-being of their family. And they really aren't afraid to make changes to be able to seek and realize those things. And they want to do it on their own terms. So lots of great research, tons of great insights that really, I think, can help companies understand where people are coming from and the why behind the research that we are seeing from lots of organizations as well.
Okay, so would you say that you're starting to see changes in the drivers of employee engagement? Could you detect that from your first swathe of research?
Yeah, what's really interesting, I think, about this research is talking about and asking people about their values. So in addition to all the questions around, do you want to go back to work? Do you like hybrid work? All of those kinds of things. Trying to really get underneath that by asking about people's values. And you don't really see major shift in values on a 6-month to year basis. There's usually larger things going on in the world that really predicate those kinds of value shifts. And so what we saw in the past year, and this survey, again, even more so, is that a top rising value for people across all 4 markets was protecting the family. So what we did is we asked people, how important is each of these following values when you're considering a potential employer or your current employer? And there were 37 different values that we asked them that they had opportunities to rate. And so protecting the value was at the top for all 4, including in the United Kingdom. Another top value second top value in the UK was enjoying life, and then self-reliance. Whereas the declining values, things that are not as important to people, is status, power, success. So really seeing people kind of being introspective and thinking differently about what they want and expect from their employer. In addition, we asked people, how do you see these 4 different areas tracking for the future? Specifically employer, your own family's economic situation, the national economy, and your country in general. And what we saw there is that, again, across all 4 markets, that people are seeing that their employers are having a bright future. And they are seeing their own economic future and situation for their family as lagging behind their employer. So for example, in the UK, 78% see their employer as heading in the right direction, whereas only 65%, 13 points less, see their own family's economic situation on the right track. So what we think about that is that it is really telling us that people want to be able to participate in the same success and bright future that they see their employers. So they're really looking for their employer to be able to provide them with that, and they will make changes if they don't feel like they're getting that and that they're sharing in that success. And again, because you put that together with the values, they're not looking for that economic situation to be better because they're looking for
Hold
power
on a
status.
second. We've got some sound interference. Kiri, could you help us with Susie's mute? Because we've got some background interrupting. This is really gold dust you're telling us, Anne. So sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
No problem. Okay, are we in a better place? I know this is the joys of technology.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think Kiri's working on it in the background. You carry on, Anne.
Okay, well, and I'm just about, covering kind of the high points here, but really, again, the fact that we know that this protect the family is so important, that's the driver behind why people are expecting and looking for an employer where they can share in that kind of bright future. It's not the power success I need to be able to be able to say I can do that. It's because I want to protect my family and all that comes with that.
Okay.
So to me, that's the really interesting part about the survey and the research is that it gets beyond just the what do you want, but the why behind it, which is always where the interesting information is.
It is, and I'm interested, Sarah, now to hear from the practical side of things. Is that what candidates are saying to you?
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess the way where I want to start with this is that we've been talking about purpose-driven communications for quite a few years now. I was on a panel talking about purpose-driven comms about 3 years ago. So it's nothing necessarily new. And I think it'd be wrong to say that it's solely because of the pandemic that we're seeing an increase in the importance of employee engagement. But I do think that the pandemic has opened a lot of eyes that weren't necessarily open before, which is positive. The more people are on the same page, the better. I think before the pandemic, pockets of businesses were better and worse and not really consistent when it comes to internal comms and engagement. But I think the pandemic's provided us an opportunity to really align on those communication channels. And what we're seeing is that candidates want to be able to go to an organisation that has good internal communications and does engage with them, because the world has changed in terms of what people want. And I think, an internal social network, we've all got them in some way, shape or form, but it's become critical. There's no choice but to use it now if you want to keep in touch with your teams. But if we look at it from an employment perspective, it won't come as a surprise to hear that a lot of companies put their hiring on hold during the pandemic. But as recruitment ramps up again, and it really is, and it has, it doesn't, it increases the importance for the need of businesses to put the focus on employee engagement. The survey says that 52% of engaged employees are looking to move. That's engaged employees. That's huge. So you really need to think about that. Candidates want to work with a company that where their values are aligned with the company. That's fairly new in recent years. It didn't used to be about that. So in terms of hiring, we want to make sure that the companies that we're working with are transparent on what they can offer an employee. So what the culture's like, what benefits they can offer, what do they do over and above just making money, and how are they giving back to the community, what's their ESG strategy. All these things are so important to a candidate these days. And yeah, it's fascinating, and I think we're on an interesting journey on this.
Really good. Jenny, I'd love to bring you in and picking up on some of the points that Sarah's mentioned there. What's the role of communicators in shaping the employee experience, would you say?
Yes, I think, just going back to the previous point, actually, I was going to say it's interesting to see how the drivers of employee engagement have changed, but also the detractors away from employee experience have changed as well. I think that remote working has made, of course, people more concerned about their mental health, feeling disconnected from colleagues, but also challenges with technology and internet is something that came to the fore during the pandemic, which is a particular challenge when we're in a kind of 4th-generation workforce, as we are at the moment. And lack of boundaries as well, I think, was one that particularly rose during the pandemic due to working from home. So those are all things that a decent employee engagement program and a decent benefits package can help address. Just on that last point. So on the role of communicators in shaping employee experience, I think that no doubt absolutely nailing comms around the return to work has or should have been the biggest focus for communicators working in partnership with HR teams, with leadership. The kind of practical side of it, so the what of it, also the why. So why are we returning to work? What is it going to bring you? But I think in terms of return to work, coming back to that bit in the middle of that Venn diagram between internal comms, external comms, employer brand, I think companies need to be really mindful of the external narrative as well when it comes to return to work. We've seen companies score huge reputational points for example, announcing that employees will be able to work from home permanently. I think it was Twitter that were first off the bat with that, saying that people could work from home forever over a year ago. There's also been companies like LinkedIn and like Bumble that have given employees a week off to recover from COVID-induced burnout. And that is a kind of national talkability that can engender real pride, I think, in employees, give them real pride in the company that they work for. And equally, I think companies need to be mindful at the moment that absence of a clear external positive narrative around return to work can have the opposite effect. So that's kind of the now. I think, and as kind of Sarah and Anne have alluded to, there is the longer term piece in line with the shifting values that the research has identified. So thinking longer term about employer value proposition beyond the return to work. The renewed desire for career mobility, for example, communicators really need to be putting career mobility at the centre of employer brand. And that's everything from communicating with managers to just ensure that they know the importance of coaching, to providing challenging assignments to keep people engaged. It's creating internal mobility opportunities. And then it's telling those stories internally, right? Like telling the stories of employees that have moved up, that have moved laterally, and then moving beyond to that purpose piece, like actually measuring and reporting on how mobility has impacted in the broader community in which businesses are operating. And I guess finally, it's that company purpose and values piece. We can't get away from it. Developing an employer value proposition that's actually based on organisational values, both for existing employees and to recruit future talent. And our research found this is particularly important to the millennial group. So many of whom, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was something like 70% of millennials would be willing to take a pay cut to work at a company they're aligned with, a purpose they're aligned to. So that's significant and can't be ignored.
Gosh, that's a lot to take on board, Jenny, and I think each one of those could merit an hour's discussion on its own. But Sarah, would you like to come back on some of those points, and particularly the practical steps Page Group has taken in order to help?
Yeah, definitely. And I can talk about this from kind of an attraction perspective as well as what we do internally. So as communicators, the thing that we do is dig into what's happening in the business and find out what's important to employees and potential employees, and then work out the best strategy to communicate it. So in Page Group, there's so much going on, and we survey our employees annually as it is to get an insight into kind of what's important to them. We also did this during the pandemic to kind of touch on that return to work piece, to find out how our employees want to work. Do they want to come into the office? Do they want a hybrid working model? And we really listened to our employees so that we weren't just telling them what we were going to do. We were actually working with them to create the new world of work for Page Group, I guess. And kind of other things, just we've got we've got 7,000 employees globally, but in the UK we've got over 1,000. And as you can imagine, there's a lot going on in different areas of the business. And one of the ways we give back as a business is, we've been doing this for years, but it's things like CV and interview skills workshops to kind of various different groups. And this is the stuff I want to know, because I know that giving back is important for the current employees and potential employees to know that what we're doing as a business. And when I find out something like that, I feel like I've struck gold, because we can then weave it into our comms programs, develop further insight, and it benefits everybody. It benefits the employees because they're working for a company which is doing good. It benefits the company because they're more likely to retain their employees, and potential employees because they can see that a company is a good fit for them. So just during the pandemic, as well as the survey, we tech allowed us to host our first ever video town halls, both globally and regionally. And it gave our employees, again, that chance to not just hear from the leaders, but also to engage. So they could ask questions anonymously if they wanted to. Obviously, it can be a bit daunting being up against a leader and ask that question. We got some really interesting, juicy questions actually from anonymously, which is really good. And there was no hiding away from that. The board answered them all. So it was really good to look at that. And if I was to give one piece of advice to communicators looking to help shape employee experience, it'll be getting to understand what makes an audience tick. So what do they need to know? Why do they need to know it? Really put yourself in their shoes. It isn't as simple as just creating a piece of content anymore. It won't really solve anything. It kind of employee communications needs to be human-led, consistent communications that are kind of frequent as well.
Excellent. Yes, internal comms has certainly moved from a broadcast entity to much more of a two-way conversation, developing that trust between the two parties. So can I come back to you again, particularly because of the Page experience? How would you say, we haven't talked much about the HR side, so that interplay between internal comms, external comms, remit, and then HR, how do they work, or how can they work more closely together to ensure retention?
Yeah, so I guess the number one issue we're seeing at the moment with our clients across multiple industries is skill shortages. So we've been working to educate clients on the benefits of not overlooking particular talent pools at the moment, with a particular focus on disability. But in terms of retention, because of skill shortages, it's so important to be able to retain your top talent. Obviously, a Page Group, if you can't, we can help with that. But from an internal perspective, again, we need to understand what makes our employees tick, promoting opportunities. So Page Group as a business is built on organic growth. We want all of our employees to know that there's an opportunity for you to grow with the business. Our CEO joined the business 35 years ago. That's a really good message. I know that's not the case at every business, but there is surely opportunity for employees at every business. And you really want to make sure that you're working well with the HR teams to communicate these opportunities. You know, an employee wants to know that the company they're with, they can grow, and the company will look after them. And it's also important to communicate the company vision. So there's a chance your best performers are already looking to leave. I touched on that stat earlier. They may be performing well, but that could be because they want to make their CV better, not just necessarily because they enjoy working for the company. So just make sure you're engaging with them in the best way you can, and educate them on why your business is great, what benefits you're offering, kind of, again, leading into the purpose and values of the business. They join the business for a reason, so make sure they don't forget why that is. Just touching on a survey that we've recently done as well around the big return to office, and this kind of plays into the survey that I mentioned earlier. We found, I think someone earlier said that their colleagues have felt less close to each other, but actually our survey found that 3 in 5 employees have felt closer to each other as a result of working from home, and a fifth have said that they will never work for a company that doesn't embrace flexible working. So as HR and comms pros, we need to listen to that. You know, what does it tell us? And we all need to work towards that.
That's clearly a huge shift, isn't it, that everyone's experienced from pandemic times, that the agenda on flexible working has absolutely transformed, massive step change, and hooray, because it was so overdue. And would you like to pick up on some of those points Sarah raised? And yes, that interplay between comms and HR teams and your experience at Zeno, how you're helping organisations.
Yeah, I think we all know how important the business partner is, you know, when you're in communications, and especially employee communications, to have that strong partnership with HR. I think it's interesting to see that some companies are literally joining. They are making it like a formal structural change where HR and communications is now under the same leader. I know Southwest Airlines has done that, and so did General Mills. So, you know, don't want to take it to chance at all to make sure that they are really sending the signal of how important it is that those two organizations work hand in hand and really closely. I think that, you know, it's everything from the table stakes, like looking at your benefits and what are your benefits up to speed on what people are expecting these days, whether it be looking at mental fitness. We talked about that before. Well-being is a lot more than having a program where you get a pedometer because you did your steps. Like that's what it was a couple of years ago. And now it's so much more than that. And it encompasses taking time for yourself, not dealing with burnout, being aware of that. So looking at those actual benefits and making sure that they are going to reflect what people are expecting, that people have come to really value because of the pandemic. And then I just think there's such an opportunity to make sure that you are tapping into and enabling and setting expectations with your managers. Jenny touched on that before, but especially really large organizations, you get the communications from the top, the executive communications, and then you go directly to everybody through your all employee comms. But that manager in the middle, that's who you really connect with as an employee. That is your person. That is who is helping you understand that vision and what it really means for your work group. They're the person that knows if your kids are sick and you can't come in that day because of that. So they're the person you really trust. And if they don't have that real understanding of the vision, understanding of the importance of the career mobility, expectations are being set with them that you can't hoard your really top performer. You need to give that top performer visibility to other opportunities inside so they can grow, because otherwise you're going to lose them, period. They'll just leave the company if you don't give them those opportunities. So I really feel like the manager communications and working with HR to have also the processes and the systems in place to hold people accountable and to really be paying attention to that. So you want to be able to walk the talk, and you need your HR partners to make that happen. And they need communications to make it digestible, easy to understand, relevant, all the things that like Sarah was saying before too.
It will be very interesting to see impacts of that coming together, as you say, at Southwest Airlines and General Mills. I hope to see a case study on that in due course. Peter, can I bring you in and put you on the spot? One of our audience members here, Peter Middleton, can you unmute, or Kiri can unmute you? You've put a question in the chat. It'd be lovely to hear from you direct.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering what the best way to communicate organizational values in all three realms that you mentioned: internal, external, and external brand. And how do you hold the structure so you can align and be accountable to those values long term, and so that they don't get lost in the kind of soup of organizational chaos?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's a passion area of mine. I think Sarah kind of teed me up for this earlier when she was talking about how employee engagement and internal comms can't just be pieces of content anymore. I really think that we need to start taking more of a campaigning mindset when it comes to employee engagement, right? In the same way that you wouldn't issue one single errant press release on a topic, you would think about a campaigning platform, and you would think about how a program of comms could ladder up to it, and your kind of exec thought leadership and all of the different things you do speaks to the same platform. I think that to create truly persuasive internal comms and communicate purpose, you need to be thinking with a campaign mindset internally. There's some really good examples of where companies have done this, actually. Like Capita fairly recently rolled out a financial wellbeing and savings platform to all, I think it's like 37,000 employees. And they've given them heaps as like financial features, like budgeting tools, savings and advice from money and pension services, all with a view to helping people reach their financial goal, which is the kind of way you would structure an external comms campaign, right? Like taking the same care and attention and having it ladder up to that platform. Santander have been campaigning internally since 2019 around supporting employees through the menopause. And that's not just kind of women of menopausal or premenopausal age, but also men and partners and people that might be affected by those issues as well. So yeah, I think it's about taking that mindset and then measuring it in the same way that you would measure an external comms campaign as well.
Good, I can see some nodding there. Pete, has that helped your thinking? Great. Anne, can I come back to you? If there were some takeouts from this hour's session, what baby steps could communicators on this call be thinking about to help measure drivers of engagement in their own organisations, or for those of their clients for that matter?
Yeah, I think, first of all, where you can get those surveys, we've talked about some different ways of doing that, but getting the input from your employees. There's a wide variety of ways you can do that. There's, of course, the annual survey that is probably done in partnership with your HR team, but looking at where you can do those pulse surveys to get that more in the moment, feedback from teams and from people. Sarah talked about how they did that for the return to office. That's key. So you're not just making assumptions about everyone's what they value and what their preferences are. So, there's all kinds of really easy, inexpensive ways that you can do. There's obviously more sophisticated measuring tools as well, but there really shouldn't be a technical reason that you can't. There's some things out there that are free and pretty easy to use, so you can get that perspective. I'd also, make sure that you're, again, back to that manager piece, which is a passion of mine. Encourage your managers to talk to people, to, find out like, well, what do you want? Have those one-on-ones, make that safe space for them to be able to kind of have those conversations with their teams, and then like bring that back up. There's interesting things companies are doing where they identify every company, every organization, every friend group has like that influencer person, right? Like the person that everyone goes to. They're the ones who like always know what's going on, and that. So find who those people are, and find ways that you can they can be an ambassador for you. They can feed information, and you can have that feedback loop. So those are some different ways I think that you can start to get that information. So you get that input, to get those inputs. Again, the days of like just one-way communication and telling employees this is the way this is going to be, you're not going to retain your employees. They're not going to be productive. They're not going to be happy. So it's really key to find various ways to kind of get their voices into your planning and then into your communications.
Thank you. It'd be great to hear from those in the audience who have done things differently, perhaps in response to pandemic, to pop them into the chat function. What's worked well for you to really understand what's going on, particularly with a workforce that's now perhaps geographically spread more than ever. So do drop them in, because it helps others to perhaps have ideas or open up ways of thinking that they hadn't considered before. So we're rattling through. There's so many more questions I want to ask, but Jenny, can I come back to you on this question of what questions could or should communicators be asking?
Yeah, I think it's two parts really. It's asking the right questions and asking them in the right ways. I think on the asking the right questions point, that's super important. Like we quoted a stat in our research from Newsweek Best Practice Institute that showed that 83% of CEOs want employees to return in person, but only 10% of employees want to come back full time. So I think there's already this like massive discrepancy between perhaps what leadership think their employees want and what employees actually want. And that's really important as to why we should be thinking about asking the right questions. And I guess there's stuff that we need to be paying attention to, like attrition levels, classic, but also increasingly organizational trust, commitment to co-workers. Do employees feel they have the right tools for the job? I think it's a really important question to ask now post-pandemic. Now we're kind of shuttling between home and the office and cursing the fact that we haven't packed our charger or packed our mouse, and we're trying to figure out how to like dial people in from home, keep team dynamics, keep client chemistry while we're doing remote or kind of semi-remote meetings. Also more aspirational questions. Do you feel inspiration to succeed and to do more? Do you feel supported in your decisions, even if they go against the grain of the organization? Do you feel informed? Do you feel like you can ask for help? And do you understand and appreciate the internal comms efforts? Because that can help you change your approach. So that's the kind of like what you're asking. In terms of how you do it, I think it's really important to have a mix. I think that pulse surveys and annual surveys, the kind of Survey Monkey format, is really useful. I think that having an opportunity for people to kind of anonymously or semi-anonymously answer is really important. There's an accountancy firm, who was it? Cooper Parry, that carry out a weekly happiness survey. So they gather data from employees every week about how happy their employees are feeling, and they can actually tailor their benefits and the benefits they offer at different points during the year based on that information. So the quant is really useful, but also the qual face-to-face forums. We at Three Monkeys here hold monthly forums by level, which allow employees to openly discuss how they're feeling. People actually tend to be pretty candid. So yeah, asking the right questions, mix of formats to make sure that people are responding, able to respond in the way they feel comfortable with.
Great, thank you. And can you share any practical examples of companies that are doing this stuff well or being particularly innovative, perhaps award winners or clients of your own?
Yeah, so the couple different great examples, I think. One is Dell. So Dell Computers, they had, people working virtually before. That wasn't, it's like many tech companies, that wasn't, really unfamiliar to them, but it's like, of course, skyrocketed now. But they are very, very deliberate and clear about what that means, the flexible arrangement. At Dell, if there's any kind of feeling of a mandate that you have to be in a certain number of days, to them that then just completely takes away from the spirit of a flexible work arrangement. The flexible work arrangement for them is built on the foundation that we come to this whole arrangement with their employees. We hired you because we trust you. You don't have to earn the trust and show us that you're going to actually get the job done. That is just the starting point. So any kind of mandate that you have to come in a certain number of days a week really erodes that kind of underlying philosophy. But they've also are really cognizant of some of the inequities that can come into place when you have that kind of hybrid workforce kind of set up, where, so they say that if any meeting you have people who are, if anyone at all in the meeting is going to be dialing in or, through a Zoom or Teams or whatever, then everybody has to be on camera, because they really want to get away from that have and have not feeling, that FOMO, right? Of you're the person sitting at home and 5 people are in a conference room and they're all chit-chatting and you can't really hear them and you can't really break in and try to make your point or ask a question. So it's just not even a question. That is just like a rule that you have to, everyone has to have their camera on. And so then that always begs the question, well, aren't people have Zoom fatigue? If you do that, people go into the office because they don't want to have to be on a Zoom. They're tired of it. They want to see each other face to face. And so recognizing that that's a thing, Dell, they really just talk about it doesn't have to always be on camera. You know what? Old fashioned, just taking a phone call and talking to people on the phone, and maybe even doing it while you're walking your dog is fine and is great and is encouraged. So I think that that's some really interesting examples that I've seen. I really think it's important that the way you roll things out is mindful of some of those unintended consequences that can have real impact to DE&I, and so really being deliberate, mindful, and thoughtful about that, but also making sure that you are reflecting your company culture. So back to the importance of culture and purpose. So Heineken is another company. Their top value is around enjoyment of life. Not surprising, given what they produce and what they do. So while they are embracing hybrid, they also have practices that they have really enjoyed and really felt like was part of their culture that their teams missed, which was Thirsty Thursdays or something like that. And so with the through the pandemic, they couldn't do that. But they found other ways to kind of really express that enjoyment of life and be having those personal connections through even taking walks and meeting their colleagues and going on a hike while they are talking about, their plans or problems they're trying to tackle. So to me, those are, it's really interesting to see how the solutions and the innovative ways they're trying to address the issues at hand really need to reflect the culture and the purpose. Because again, I think, Sarah said that these people came to work here for a reason, so trying to continue to strengthen the culture. And that's where sometimes I think that I get frustrated with leaders, back to Jenny's point about how this high number of leaders who expect everyone to come back, and they often use the reason, not maybe it's an excuse, maybe it's a reason of, oh, well, our culture is eroding. Well, I think that's very easy answer to try to give. I think that you can be creative and innovative and still answer what your employees are asking so that they can have somewhat of a work-life balance, where they can not get, be able to be creative, get those breaks, and be able to still have a culture.
I really like that point, the idea that what you're doing for your employees really needs to reflect the company values. And if everyone could hand on heart say they're doing that, then you're all working for great organisations, but something to take back to base, sure, to think about. Sarah, what about the employers that you work with, your clients? Are there any great case studies you could share with us, or
It's quite hard for me to do that because I don't really work with the clients, so it's not. I could more come at it from kind of an internal comms perspective internally. So yeah, sorry, I don't know if I've got any good examples that I'm seeing at Page Group that I can share.
Fine, no problem. You mentioned DE&I, Anne, and so either Jenny or Anne who'd like to take the question. But how would you say that? What's happening in terms of the employee experience, particularly between following Black Lives Matter and of course the Me Too movement over the last 18 months? What trends are you seeing, and did the research show any shine any light on those areas? Jenny, I'll come to you.
I think I'll defer to Anne on that, just because she's a bit closer to the research.
Then back to Anne.
Okay, yeah, happy to share that. The research did show that DE&I is definitely an expectation of employees that it be part of your purpose. But they also are not seeing that employers are delivering on it. So throwing up some statistics for you, specifically in the UK, 73% of the people that we surveyed said that diversity, equity, and inclusion is either extremely or very important when they're looking for employers. So, nearly 3/4. And yet when they look at their current employer, they only around 60% thought that their current employer was really doing a good job with ensuring that DE&I is part of is a key value and important, part of their purpose and living their purpose. So that's a big gap. That's a 13% gap that employers need to step it up and be looking again at what they are doing and holding people accountable, and then talking about it, and really again going to their teams, I think, and making sure that if you have employee resource groups, how are you really using those employee resource groups? Is it just Women's Engineering Day celebrations and that kind of thing? Or are you really going to those employee resource groups and getting their input on business issues and product development and other really meaty things? Are your leaders really going and listening, not going in and defending or not going in and explaining, but going in and listening to those employee resource group areas to hear what their experience is like at the company and where do they see opportunities for improvement, so that you can eat away at that 13% difference. When it comes to, I think, like I said earlier, even with the people returning to the office, the other studies have shown that people of color are much more likely to not want to go back into the office, that they feel like there is a safety by not having to go into the office, which is really a sad statement to me. So having awareness of that, I think, working moms, working parents are much more likely in other surveys that they want that flexibility so that they can, go volunteer at their kids' school, not have to be sitting on a train, getting home in time to make dinner for your kids and have it be something that you feel good about. But then that runs into, again, that issue of, well, if those are the folks that are at home and other people are in the office, who's getting the opportunities for new challenging assignments? Is it the person that you just ran into at the coffee station? Oh yeah, Tom, oh my gosh, he's doing that great project. He just told me about it at the coffee station. Now I need someone for this new thing that we're doing. Yeah, let's have Tom do it. Well, poor Jenny, who's working from home and got her kids and everything else, out of sight, out of mind. So there's some real implications here from a DE&I perspective that companies need to have eyes wide open on. And again, I think having that partnership with HR is going to be really important.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. Jenny, I'd love to pick on you for the expertise around when you've got a diverse workforce, but we've got perhaps frontline workers and then office workers, so different audiences. What are the hints and tips on making sure that both those audiences or disparate audiences are well looked after from a communication point of view?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge there is channel usage, right? So your frontline workers, if they're not kind of stuck behind a desk 9 to 5, are going to need to access information through different channels to people that are working in an office. Anne and I were actually tackling a brief together a couple of months ago on this very topic. And as part of my research, I came across a company there, a wastewater utilities service provider, which sounds a little bit dull, but actually they were facing a really unique challenge, which is that most of their employees are kind of like out of the office workers, I suppose, rather than frontline workers. Most of them are skilled manual roles, but most of them were men as well. So there was kind of a very specific set of challenges that they were facing in terms of their mental health, particularly during the pandemic, and being less willing to kind of talk about their feelings. So what they did, which I thought was really clever, was they implemented a wellbeing app on the phones of each one of those frontline workers. And at the beginning of their shift, when they clocked in, each worker was asked how they were feeling, ranked from very good to very bad. And in the case where they entered very bad, an independent kind of mental health practitioner actually got in touch with them, like proactively reached out to them to see how they were feeling. And I think that's good, isn't it? That's just something that they can do when they're kind of clocking in, and it's really simple and light touch. I think there's also the need to make the benefits more, or the help and support available more focused in people that can be practically reached from people that aren't in an office. So for example, this company implemented wellbeing first aiders. They had a greater number of wellbeing first aiders than perhaps other companies might, so they could visibly see them and approach them if they needed them.
Excellent. I've just seen another question pop in. Peter, you're on fire today. I think we've got time to answer that and then to open it up to anybody else who'd like to ask. So Peter, let's hear your voice.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering, in regards to employee wellbeing and motivation, especially around this area of equity, how is it that you balance employee empowerment with the fact that some employees will be moving from a place of compliance to authority or existing power structure?
Who would you like to answer that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe the research might be interesting with that. Like, is there any research in that area, like around compliance to existing power structure? Mentioned like the fact that some employees aren't comfortable even returning to work. Interested in that perspective.
And do you want to take that on?
So by compliance, do you mean like those mandates, like you have to come back to work a certain number of days, or like the vaccine mandates? Or I just want to make sure I'm understanding kind of the question.
Yeah, I mean compliance in the sense that it's a motivating factor for someone. If an environment is not equitable, then the employees will be moving from a state from a motivational factor, compliance first, and then their own well-being and empowerment second. So I wondered if there's any research there, or what your opinion on that is.
None of the research is like popping into my head immediately. I mean, I think that to me, if you can explain the why behind the compliance, and help people understand the reason these compliance pieces are in place, and then so that then that kind of like helps to move them forward. But then, yes, like what additional things do we need to be aware of for your own personal situation? And every job is different. I mean, I think that you can't do a one size fits all across the board, referencing before the frontline workers and office workers. You go into your profession and you kind of know that is what that means, and there's positives and negatives to everything. And so just kind of not being Pollyanna-ish about that, and but still being respectful of across the board. I'll have to think on that. I like that question, but I don't have any data that I think that off the top of my head that is going to really shed amazing light on that.
Thanks, Peter and Anne. I think if you've got a culture where the word compliance or employee compliance is the currency of the day, then there are some bigger issues at play. But yeah, food for thought and perhaps a research question. Emma, would you like to ask your question? Thanks for dropping it into the chat.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot, or you guys talked a lot about the kind of like return to work and the shift between work from home hybrids, and just interested to know kind of other organisations' experience in terms of where you are. I think from where I work at the moment, it's a very slow phased return, and I think it might slow down even further here, given what we've heard from the government in the last sort of like 24 hours and so how you kind of adapt your employee engagement and internal comms around that, knowing that it's still quite a changeable environment really, and help people feel confident with the way forward.
I can step in on this one if you like. So our business is quite interesting because we're a recruitment company, and we've got 80% of our workforce are salespeople. So you've kind of got the sales people who have been going back into the office throughout the whole kind of pandemic, really. We kept our office open on purpose to allow the people that wanted to go back into the office for whatever reason that may be, and a lot of that was around kind of mental health, not issues, mental health, because we knew that we've got quite a young workforce who were potentially living with many other people and all trying to fight for a bit of office space in a shared house, for example. So we wanted to keep the office open to cater for those guys. But we've really given our employees a choice throughout the whole of the pandemic, whether they want to be in the office or whether they don't want to be in the office. And we've had very clear communications from our managing director in the UK around this and what his expectations are, which are, we want you to kind of work flexibly, whatever that looks like for you. But at the same time, there is a reality that our culture as a business, we are kind of, we do work well office based, and that collaboration piece. So, we do want to encourage collaboration, and that might mean going into the office kind of 2-3 times a week. But we don't want to, we've purposely not enforced telling people what they should do, and we're not going to mandate what days they need to be in the office. To be honest, it's quite tricky, and I think it's we won't know until we've kind of started to go through the process what works and what doesn't work. But I think it's going back to that, listening to your employees and what's really important to them, because we know as a business, and I guess other business should kind of think about this as well, is that if you're not flexible, other businesses are, and you may well lose your good employees as a result of that. So again, I just think it's a case of be open the dialogue, find out what works for people, and communicate effectively.
Jenny, anything to add to that? Any experience with your clients currently?
Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that we have had these 18 months at home. It's come with benefits and it's come with downsides. I think that from speaking to a number of my clients, many employees are nervous about returning to the office, and I think there's actually an unusually parental role that is probably the most parental role that organizations have had to play in terms of how they communicate with their employees that I can think of in the time that I've been working with PR. So yeah, I think it's kind of understanding that people are nervous about returning to the office, but again, having that clear vision in place, having that why in place, that why is so important. Why are we dragging you back to the office? It's because it's important for you guys to collaborate. It's because we feel like you'll do your best work. And then just again, listening to employees, over communicating. I don't think you can over communicate at this point.
There's a great Danish meme doing the rounds, it'll probably go viral, but of turning the tables, of adults being scared to go back to work with their children, leading them in as if it's their first day of school. It's fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, I really recommend searching it out. We've just got a couple of minutes. I'd like to let you go early, finishing just ahead of the turn of the half hour. Any more questions to come into the chat, or has everyone felt they've asked what they wanted to ask? I think that answers it. I would like to say thank you so much to the panel. You've put a lot of work into this. It's been a pleasure meeting you both before and of course interviewing you today. Big thanks to PRCA, and Rebecca, thank you so much. You are the indomitable force that brings us all together. Thank you for your energy and passion for this subject, and I'll hand it back to you.
Yes, exactly. I think, yeah, we're ready to wrap up now, and unless there's any more questions. I can see a couple of comments about the research. Yes, of course, I'm sure the Page Group report about the return to work will be available on their website. Ours certainly is, so you can either go to the Zeno Group or the Three Monkeys Zeno website, and the full report is on there. And let us know if you've got any questions on the values or the results of that. As I mentioned at the start, Annabelle is an expert on this, has written a book on internal communications called The People Business. So dig that out if you want some bedtime reading as well. Echoing what Annabelle said, yes, thank you everyone on the panel for contributing today, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you.